Welcome, Loe Hornbuckle, to Wealth Matters podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, so we'll just get started. How did you get started in real estate?
So originally I got started in real estate, doing single family homes. I had a W-2 job, but I'd always been fascinated by real estate. It always really kind of intrigued me. And so the first thing I ever did was I did a flip property. And
Okay.
my first flip was during the middle, right at the end of the great economy in 2007. So I got stuck with this house that I couldn't sell during the Great Recession.
Yes.
And I turned it into a rental house and just sort of treaded water for a long time and eventually sold the house. So my first deal was terrible. So that's always a good start.
Yeah. So that you learned a lot of lessons out of it. So when did you sell that property?
We sold it maybe 2011. No, it was later than that, probably like 2014 or 2015.
Oh, okay. So you learned about buy and hold.
we eventually converted it to like a lease option.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So in Louisiana, rent to own is kind of a big option. It's a little less true here in Texas.
Nice.
And so we did that and had a tenant for a really long time. And after a while, unfortunately, their circumstances meant they couldn't stay in the house, and we ended up having to sell it.
I see. So I was going to ask you about your best and worst deal. I think I already know about the worst deal.
No, that's actually not the worst deal.
Oh, okay.
But it was a bad deal.
Yeah. So can you tell us about what was your worst deal and the best deal, and what did you learn out of those?
Sure. Yeah. So the worst deal that I did is we bought a low income portfolio in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I'm from.
Oh, you're from Shreveport. I know Shreveport pretty well.
Yes, I am from Shreveport, also known as Ratchet City. That is where I'm from.
Yes, I know. My uncle was a doctor there, and he lived there for like 15 years and then moved to Chicago. So I used to visit Shreveport.
I lived there for 30 years, and that's where I learned all my real estate chops, or at least initially. And I bought a low-income portfolio there, and the numbers were great. And what we kind of learned about low-income housing is that oftentimes the turnover of units and stuff like that can wipe out such a huge amount of your
Exactly.
And the lesson that I learned there is to do things that you understand. And I don't really have any frame of reference for houses that rent for $500 a month or $600 a month. So when I was successful, when I was renting to people that were renting for $1,200 a month or $1,500 a month, because that at the time was about what I would be renting if I was a renter. So I just understood that demographic, I understood what they wanted, I understood what things they needed, and so I learned from that, basically to do things that you understand at the core. And if you stick to what you know, then you're much more likely to be successful.
Right. Can't go wrong with that. So what was your best deal?
So my best deal was probably, I've got a few that are probably close. My best deal was probably one of the care homes that I built in Dallas. We bought a property for about $560,000 and remodeled it for about $250,000.
Oh, wow.
And that house cash flow is probably about $180,000 a year. So it's a pretty good house.
That's a great deal. So now that you mentioned about care home, we can jump onto the topic. So when you mention care home, is that residential assisted living or RAL?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So RAL is kind of more of a national term. Care home is what some people call it. Every city and state kind of has different terminology, but yeah, I focus on residential assisted living. That's designed to take care of people that have dementia and Alzheimer's. We also do some assisted living as well, but a lot of our clients have dementia or have Alzheimer's.
I see. So why move from flip to rentals to RAL or residential assisted living?
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't a linear progression. There wasn't any one thing that happened. My affinity for real estate was always there, but I've never really been good at acquisitions, and I've never really been good at disposition. So all that's left is sort of the middle, and the middle is operations.
Right.
And so, I'm not somebody that is going to spend, hundreds of hours sending out postcards and trying to, really negotiate really hard with someone in really desperate situations so I can get the house for, 10 or 15% cheaper. That's really not my mentality. And I'm also, I'm not necessarily the greatest at selling things, but what I have found through my career is that when it comes to operations, when it comes to rentals, things like that, I was very successful. And what really worked out well for me was attending the Residential Assisted Living Academy, learning about the business. I had a father go through a bad experience in hospice, and it made me realize, that there's this awesome opportunity to help people that are in really difficult situations and help their families through really difficult situations. And we've been able to build a, really, really solid, mid-sized company in Dallas that's very well respected in the community. The houses are always, 95% to 100% occupied. And we're always just really happy to be able to serve the community and get paid well to do so.
So that's interesting. So when and how did you transition to RAL?
Gotcha. So I started doing residential assisted living in 2015.
Oh, okay.
And the way that I transitioned into it, I was actually working for an apartment management company that had about 10,000 units at one time. And I was working at a kind of a Class C property. And I remember the summer was coming up, and I was starting to get really worried because this particular community had children that were somewhat misbehaved. Uh-huh. And so I was trying to imagine working there in the summer with it being hot and like chasing around kids. And I'm talking about like these kids would like I caught kids like smashing air conditioner units with bricks. They had a lot of time on their hands, and they were just like, we had a fence that kept getting torn down. So I literally was like, guys, they're going to keep tearing the fence down because they were trying to cut across a parking lot. I said, why don't we just install a gate so that way they don't tear the fence down. So I was just dreading doing that. And then, so I was going to be leaving that company because I really took that job for education reasons. I really didn't need, the job was probably paid about 25% or 30% of what I was making before when I was.
Oh, wow.
So, but I took the job for the education, and I learned a lot, and I made a lot of good contacts, but I just really wasn't looking forward to that summer. So I said, okay, I'm going to take a little time off, figure out what I'm going to do. And then the week after I resigned, I heard a presentation about senior housing, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the very first time Gene was on the Real Estate Guys podcast, I heard it, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Single family homes, I can wrap my head around it. And so I just sort of dove right in and haven't looked back.
That's a great story. So pretty much you worked to learn, and then you realized this is what you should be doing, and you just jumped right into it, right? No waiting, no analysis paralysis.
No, I just, from, the Tony Robbins concept, I burned the boats.
Yeah. I like that.
I committed.
So I personally looked into RAL as well here in Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and just the price of real estate would not make sense. I spent about a year analyzing tons of opportunities, and it just did not make sense. But I also started learning that you also have to have, certain state certifications and whatnot. So what kind of regulations should someone be aware of?
Well, in general, you have to understand that residential assisted living is it's both a state business. It's regulated by the state, but it's also regulated at some level at the zoning level, which is usually done by cities.
Okay.
So some states have very sort of consistent viewpoints all across the state. Where I'm from in Texas, different cities, different counties have different rules because residential assisted living, is it a single family home? Is it multifamily? Mm-hmm. Is it commercial? Is it not commercial? And there's a lot of people in the community that think they don't want it. And I say think they don't want it because usually when it's there, no one minds. Right. It's just the concept of, there's going to be a nursing home next door to me. There's going to be an assisted living facility next door to me. It can cause a little bit of sort of not in my backyard and cause a little bit of fear. But the thing is there's so many people in the community that are happy you're there. They're just not as vocal. And so A lot of it depends on the area that you're in, but the first thing I try to do is I look at the state rules. So anytime I'm advising someone on how to analyze a market, I look at the state rules and make sure those state rules are favorable. And by favorable, I just mean that, number one, they allow you a decent number of residents. For example, some states might cap you at 6 residents. Some states might allow you to have 16. Obviously, you get a lot more economies of scale, a lot more efficiency at 16 residents than you do at 6. So, you want to look for states that have favorable rules. There are plenty of people that are successful with 6 beds, but they have to charge a lot more. So you want to find state rules that are favorable. And then once you do that, then I start looking at neighborhood level, city level, trying to figure out, where I think there's a need for this based on, where are there populations that can afford this, where are there older populations, and what cities and neighborhoods are welcoming. You might find the perfect place, but there's an HOA that's determined to fight you.
Yeah. HOA is a problem.
Maybe you win, maybe you don't. But my preference would be to go somewhere where I'm welcome. And so a lot of places understand this model and understand the need is there. And so you just try to find places where you're welcome, because ultimately the people that you're arguing with are your future customers. So you don't really want to get in an argument right out of the gate, but sometimes it is necessary.
No, that's a great point. And I do not understand why people think NIMBY, not in my backyard for something like RAL, right? It's better to have, elderly people than those kids you just mentioned about, right?
Yeah, if you think about it, anytime you've ever had a bad neighbor, most people will tell you the bad neighbor was a husband and wife who fought a little too loud, or somebody that had, teenage driving kids.
Exactly.
Riding through yards and hitting mailboxes over, and just in general throwing parties when the parents are out of town. Most people don't complain when you have 8 people that are elderly living next door to you watching MASH. Yeah. That doesn't usually cause any problems.
Yeah, they're playing bingo.
Exactly, yeah.
So I have another question. How does an investor or operator himself or herself protect himself or herself, because you are dealing with an elderly person, right? Someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's, as you mentioned, or other health conditions. What do you have? What kind of insurance you need, or how do you protect yourself, right, from other, from asset protection perspective, and a lot of other, legalities?
So a couple things. One is I want to kind of dispel the idea that it's necessarily a litigious business. I've actually been sued more in the home renting business than I have in the assisted living business. So most people, if you communicate well, most of the time in assisted living, you won't have any legal issues, because it's usually when someone asks you 4 or 5 times to take care of something, you don't get it done, and then something bad happens, that usually gets sued. So we try to do a good job of having good communication. So it's not a very litigious business, but it can be, especially for big operators. But for smaller guys, it's usually a pretty lawsuit free. But the other component is something really important, which is just your same basic asset protection. The things that are going to interact with clients is a separate LLC. The things that own the real estate is a separate LLC or a separate entity. Obviously, you can get insurance policies for personal liability and general liability, and errors and omissions. So insurance policies. The insurance market for residential assisted living is not very robust nationally. There's only like 3 or 4 carriers. So sometimes they're a little limited, just because a lot of people don't want to insure small for small assisted living facilities. But there are a few good providers out there. So the insurance is definitely, it's expensive, but the truth is, if you have a suit, it's probably gonna be kind of an expensive suit. So, you have good asset protection strategies with your organizations. And then, of course, your first line of defense is, of course, your insurance policy.
Thanks, Lou. So we'll take a break here. After the break, we'll continue chatting with Loe Hornbuckle on how and why to operate a residential assisted living facility. Welcome back. I'm chatting with Lou about RAL, Residential Assisted Living. Hey, Lou, I understood about the LLC, asset protection, as well as, having proper general insurance, as well as E&O insurance. What about, like, when I'm doing multifamily deals, I'm always looking at how I can do a value add and increase the cap rate and NOI, right? So is there a way to make sure how you can do a value add in RAL, or maybe by offering additional amenities or services, or maybe renovating the house, etc. Can you give us an idea?
Yeah, so I think as compared to multifamily, I think it's a bit different, only because in multifamily, these cap rates are 5 or 6% a lot of times. And so every dollar of income, might increase the sales price by, 17x or 20x or whatever the number is. And small assisted living facilities don't really trade like that. So typically a small assisted living facility might trade maybe real estate value plus 2 to 4 times the business earnings.
Correct.
And so, adding value in that way doesn't necessarily turbocharge your exit. Now, one of the ways you can produce a lot of money is by buying a house that's kind of distressed. It's a single family home that nobody can figure out what to do with, and then going in, but it's the right fit for what you want to do, and then going in and remodeling it for residential assisted living. There's some opportunities to build some equity that way. But for the most part, your strategy with residential assisted living is really more just have this thing that spins off a tremendous amount of cash flow that has oftentimes, a single family home can sometimes have a cap rate of, 15%, 20%, 25%. Wow. Those are pretty common. And so with the right structure, the cash on cash return can be very good. And so, these are one of the few assets that, if you told every apartment investor right now you had to pay cash for the apartment complex, very few apartments would trade right now, because who wants to, invest $10 million to get a 5% or a 6% return? Right.
Yeah. If you can't leverage, there is no way.
It wouldn't work. But with a care home, if I told you, hey, spend $1 million and you'll get $180,000 in cash flow, you may do that.
Yeah, I would jump on it.
Obviously, care homes, because of their massive cap rates, you have the opportunity to produce a durable stream of cash flow for a long period of time. So most people get into the care home business with the intention of owning until they no longer want to be in the business, and then selling the asset to the next person and going from there.
Right. And do you hire employees as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have about 40 employees with our Dallas operation.
So you need to worry about the employee as well, right? The employee side, the payroll, etc. Right? You have to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my team does most of that, but yeah, it's still something we have to worry about.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And which market are you focused in? Dallas mostly?
Yeah, so I have 5 locations now in Dallas. We're working on number 6.
Nice.
And then I've got a couple of big projects we're doing. So I'm kind of moving on from residential assisted living to doing residential assisted living on one campus.
Nice.
So right now we're developing, we've got 6.5 acres we're developing in South Louisiana, and then 20 acres that we're developing in North Dallas in a town called Denton, Texas.
Yes, I know Denton. Yeah.
And so we're developing land in those 2 markets to be a campus, a planned campus of care homes. So instead of having care homes spread all throughout the city, you pull up and it's a neighborhood, but the neighborhood is care homes. So it's nice because you can have everything all in one location.
So I assume you are based out of Dallas. So Dallas makes sense, or not Dallas, right? But how are you going to manage the property in Louisiana? Because I looked into it and I was worried that, it's not same as single family or multifamily where I can hire a property manager and they take care of most of the stuff.
So we build out operations in whatever market we go to. So about 9 months before construction complete, we'll actually be starting vertical construction in the next couple of months. And about 9 months before that construction is complete, I spend a lot of time in the market and hire the key person. And then they're going to be kind of working marketing and then building a team in the background, so that when the construction's complete, we've got a basic outline of who our team's going to be. So we went into Lake Charles with the intention of hiring a third-party operator. But when I toured a lot of the facilities in the market, frankly, I wasn't very impressed. And so if I wasn't impressed, I didn't think the clients would be impressed. And so we decided ultimately that keeping management in-house would allow us to have better quality control. Of course, obviously you pick up the revenue stream from that. So, we're really focused on, quality control and understanding why our model of small, boutique setting works really well. And so we're just sort of focused on keeping that in-house. It does hamper the growth a little bit, What it
Right.
does mean is that if there's a problem or an issue, I understand it on a level where I can at least get us out of the situation. I fear for a lot of the people that are so reliant on third parties that if something ever happens, they don't necessarily know how to solve the problem, you know?
Yeah, I
So
agree.
we're real focused on keeping that in house. And right now that's just a big focus of ours.
So you just mentioned Lake Charles, right? So is that where I think Victor is also developing huge apartment building, right? So I've heard good things about Lake Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Victor's Minash is the one that actually brought me in on the project.
Ah,
So he
okay.
called me and said, I got this deal that I think would be a good fit for, um, assisted living. And I went down there and took a look at it and we figured it out from there.
That's awesome. It's great. So hey, we'll change some tracks. I want to know more about how you got started. So what advice would you give to your younger self right now that you have been doing this thing, and I assume you are 37, 36. So what would the advice would you give to your 20 years, 7 years self?
I never know what to answer to that question because I feel like you can't skip experiences, so everything that's happened to me, good and bad, has all added up to who I am today. So I don't know that I would change anything because every dumb thing I've ever done, I lived and I learned from it, and that's the best teacher for me. So I always kind of said that the metaphor that I always used, because a lot of people thought I was kind of crazy to get into assisted living. They especially thought I was crazy to try to manage it myself. And the analogy I use is this: if you're a boxer, you spend your whole life, wanting to hit other people.
Hmm.
But at some point, you're going to get hit
You are
yourself.
going to get it. Yeah.
And if you can be the best boxer in the world, but if one punch takes you down, if you got a glass jaw, then you're not going to have a very long career as a boxer. And I think that's true in business. I think a lot of
Yes.
people, they want the shortcut, they want the easy way, they want everything to be kind of handed to them, and that can work for a time. But almost everybody in business, everybody in life, everybody in boxing is going to get punched at some point. And I think a lot of people find out at really bad time that they have a glass jaw. And for me, I said, hey, I want to learn how to take a punch. So if I can go into assisted living and struggle and make mistakes and have problems and just, work hard in the business, then it'll allow me to teach others. It'll allow me to grow, and it'll allow me to be very successful as long as I take those lessons to heart and improve myself and improve the company. So I'm really committed to the process. And for me, the process is make mistakes, learn, make mistakes, learn, make mistakes, learn. And that's really kind of been the key ingredient. So maybe I would tell my 20-year-old self or 24-year-old self or whatever. I would just say, hey, it's okay. Go fail as fast as you can.
That's a great advice, though. I keep telling the same thing to some of my friends as well, that if you don't take action, you are not going to learn. A lot of people, they want to learn about real estate or whatever, alternative investments, but they never pull the trigger, right? They read all kind of books, they go to all kind of seminars, and then, if I ask them, they haven't bought anything in past 3 years, 4 years. And the only way to actually learn is by jumping into it, right? So that's a great advice.
Absolutely.
Hey, which is your most favorite business or finance or personal development book?
Um, I really like two books that I like the most are one, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, yeah, it's a great book.
I just think it provides such wisdom that, I've probably one of the few business books I read multiple times. And then there's a series of books, Now Discover Your Strengths.
Okay.
And it's by, what happened is the Gallup organization surveyed a bunch of employees and managers, and they kind of found out like what makes people successful.
Mm-hmm.
And their theory is everyone wants to work on their weaknesses, but you should basically almost ignore your weaknesses and focus on your strengths instead. And so that basically you can just get better at the things you're naturally good at already. So I've really enjoyed that book because for me, I know weakness. Are you losing me?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, my internet at my house is not all that great. So if I'm constantly trying to train away my weaknesses, I'm not going to be successful. So I've really kind of focused on, like, hey, what do I do well, understanding myself, and then doing things that allow me to be successful. And for me in this business, one of the reasons why I've been able to grow pretty quickly in residential assisted living is I just really pride myself on being able to understand what the client needs and the families, and then communicate it well. A lot of people in healthcare don't communicate very well, and it's a real problem in our business. And so we really just tried to set the bar on having top level communication, because at the end of the day, if you're at home and you get a text message from, my manager or whatever, and it's a picture of your mom or dad at a birthday party having a nice day, it's going to make you feel good.
Oh yeah.
And if something bad happens, if you hear about it quickly, it's going to make you feel like they're being well taken care of. So communication is a big part of our business.
Yeah. And communication and transparency are the two things which will help you become successful in any kind of business, pretty much. So, and I like that book as well. I haven't read the book, but this is exactly same thing Tony Robbins mentioned as well in his book, Awaken the Giant Within, that focus on your strengths, right? Do not try to improve on your weaknesses. Do not try to fix all that, but focus on your strength, and you'll be able to, run faster, right, towards your goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can my listeners reach out to you?
Absolutely. So, people have questions about all kinds of things as related to assisted living. Sometimes they got a question about, they're looking for a place for mom or dad or their spouse, and they can certainly reach out for that. Even if it's not in Dallas, I'll try to point them to whatever resources I have. If they're interested in learning more about being on our investor list, or of course, if they want to learn more about how to get started in the business, I can refer them to a company I work with that helps with training. So the best way to reach me is my first name, Loe, L-O-E. And then my company's called Sage Oak. So the website is The Sage Oak, TheSageoak.com. So loe@thesageoak.com, and they can email me whatever they'll need, and I'll try to point them in the right direction.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.